The door slides. The room is too bright. A mic checks for last words that barely carry. Silence. Then a breath you can hear. Were these rituals, meals, and statements meant to humanize or to tidy the ending? You're watching Twisted Case, ethically anchored true crime built for hard conversations. If this work helps you think straighter about justice, tap follow so you don't miss the next case. Every death chamber has a threshold. One door in, one curtain out. The air is cold and dry. The hiss of vents is the only steady sound. Inside, the routine narrows everything to two artifacts: a last meal and final words. We study them because they're legible, because the crime is already carved into record, and this final ritual is the only part that still moves. 2025 has been relentless. Florida on a historic pace, other states pressing forward with new drugs, old gurneys, even nitrogen masks. By the time we hit midsummer, families of victims carried decades of breath they didn't realize they were holding. And defense teams were still filing midnight motions in rooms lit by humming fluorescents. What follows are the last 10, from June 10 through August 19, each moment sketched by what was eaten, what was said, and what it might mean. The process is controlled, humane. Meals are a courtesy, statements a right. Microphones that miss, drugs that don't take evenly, a mask that fogs as bodies convulse, praise for humane methods spoken through clenched breath. So, are these endings as tidy as they read in the logbooks? One, Cale Barrington Bates, Florida, August 19, 2025. Heavy late summer air, inside it's bright, refrigerated calm. Case: in 1982, a woman was abducted from a Panhandle insurance office and murdered. 4 decades of appeals later, the state called witnesses back to the threshold. Last meal: declined. No special request, no spiritual advisor meeting. He'd been awake since 5:15 a.m., 3 family visits logged. Final words: when asked if he wished to speak, he said no. Curtain up, 3 drug sequence, pronounced at 6:17 p.m. Victim's family: the husband bore witness 43 years after a door at his wife's office opened and didn't close the same way. A declined meal and withheld statement feel like a locked drawer. Nothing to share, nothing to soften. Does restraint read as acceptance or as refusal? Two, Byron Lewis Black, Tennessee, August 5, 2025. Sound: the steady HVAC thrum, then a ragged exhale that cuts the room. Case: 1988 Nashville, Angela Clay and her daughters were killed. The later years centered on Mr. Black's frail condition and an implanted defibrillator that the courts declined to deactivate. Executed by lethal injection at Riverbend, pronounced 10:43 a.m. Last meal: pizza with mushrooms and sausage, donuts, butter pecan ice cream. He ate before dawn. Final words: asked if he had any, he answered, "No, sir." Moments later, witnesses reported him lifting his head, groaning and saying, "It's hurting so bad." The official box for final statement stays blank. The body writes its own statement anyway. What does mercy mean when the pain speaks louder than the man? Three, Edward J. Zakrowski II, Florida, July 31, 2025. The warm glow fading outside. Inside, stark white floods the glass. Case: 1994. His wife and 2 young children murdered in Okaloosa County. The warrant made Florida's record-setting 9th execution of the year. Pronounced at 6:12 p.m. Last meal: fried pork chops, fried onions and potatoes, bacon, toast, root beer, ice cream, pie, coffee. Final words: he thanked the good people of the Sunshine State for executing him in the most cold, calculated, clean, humane, efficient way possible, and said he had no complaint. Gratitude aimed at the mechanism that ends you. Defiance or acceptance? A performance for the record or a last grip on control? Four, Michael Bernard Bell, Florida, July 15, 2025. A faint doorbell chime from a distant corridor, soft footsteps, a microphone click. Case: 1993, outside a Jacksonville bar, 2 people were shot. Bell misidentified a car he believed belonged to his brother's killer. Decades later, the courts let the sentence stand. Pronounced 6:25 p.m. Last meal: a breakfast plate at 6:30 a.m., omelet, bacon, home fries, orange juice. He met a spiritual advisor, nothing else. He framed death as deliverance from time, an inversion that unsettles. Is that resignation? Or rebuke to the very concept of a lifetime cage? Five, Richard Gerald Jordan, Mississippi, June 25, 2025. Heavy Delta humidity pressing on the flat road to Parchman. Inside, air returns hum, and the clock's second hand is the loudest thing. Case: the state's longest-serving death row prisoner, convicted of the 1976 kidnapping and murder of Edwina Martyr amid a ransom plot, was put to death at Mississippi State Penitentiary. Last meal: chicken tenders, French fries, strawberry ice cream, root beer float at 4 p.m. Final words: he thanked those present for a humane way of doing this, apologized to the victim's family, and told his wife he loved her. I will see you on the other side. The word humane sits like a pebble in your shoe. When the condemned praises the method, is it grace, strategy, or a way to steady the room for the people he harmed? Six, Stephen Christopher Stanko, South Carolina, June 13, 2025. 2 short announcements over the intercom, the soft wheeze of a second dose. Case: 2 death sentences for separate 2005 murders, Laura Lang in Murrells Inlet and Henry Lee Turner in Conway, plus the rape and attempted murder of Ling's teenage daughter who survived. He chose lethal injection over the firing squad or the chair. Declared dead 6:34 p.m. after a 2-dose pentobarbital protocol the state made public in court that week. Last meal: fried fish, fried shrimp, crab cakes, baked potato, carrots, fried okra, cherry pie, banana pudding, sweet tea, eaten the night before. Final words: a 3 to 3.5 minute statement of remorse. Sorry is never enough, in effect. Read, voiced in the chamber before the injections proceeded. He asked not to be judged solely by his worst day. The room stayed quiet except for the intercom call for the second dose. John, or George John, or John Fitzgerald, Oklahoma, June 12, 2025. A hard white grid above the gurney. The opaque window glass holds the heat at bay. Case: 1999 Tulsa carjacking, kidnapping, Mary Bowles shot and killed, Gerald Thurman, who tried to help, also killed. After years in federal custody, he was transferred back to Oklahoma. The courts declined to stop his date. pronounced 10:11 a.m. Last meal. Declined any special meal. He ate the regular tray. Chicken pot pie, 2 rolls, carrots, 2 fruit cups. Final words. Peace to everyone. 10 seconds that changed nothing and somehow changed the room. Sparse food, sparse words. The smallness is jarring against the enormity of the loss. Anthony Floyd Wainwright, Florida, June 10, 2025. Afternoon thunderclouds stack over Bradford County. The witness room is all white noise and cold steel. Case, 1994. Carmen Gayhart, 23 years old, a mother of 2, abducted from a supermarket parking lot, raped, shot. His co-defendant died on death row of natural causes in 2023. Wainwright's final appeals failed. Pronounced 6:22 p.m. Last meal. Declined. He had 2 visitors, his fiancée and a spiritual advisor. Final words. He made a statement, but it was inaudible to witnesses behind the glass. Another blank box, audible to none, reportable only as a category. An ending reduced to a checkbox. Gregory Hunt, Alabama, June 10, 2025. The seal of a nitrogen mask adjusting, a faint wheeze. Exhalations grow shallow. Case, 1988, Karen Lane beaten and sexually assaulted. Hunt chose nitrogen hypoxia, making Alabama the nation's standard bearer for the method in 2025. Pronounced 6:26 p.m. Last meal. He refused the final dinner tray, hot dogs, vegetables, potatoes, black-eyed peas. Accepted breakfast and lunch earlier in the day. Final words. None. Witnesses saw hand signs, a thumbs up, a peace sign, before the gas flowed and involuntary movements began. Alabama calls the motions expected. Viewers call them something else. Whatever word you choose, the room remembers the sound of the mask. What these 10 moments add up to. The mic problem. At least 2 Florida cases this summer logged inaudible final statements. Words turned private by air, glass, or intention. If the last thing you say can't be heard, who is the statement for? The pain problem. Tennessee's reports of audible distress from Byron Black sit against the assurance of painless sedation. If the body protests, do we trust the doctrine or the sound? The method problem. Nitrogen is sold as quick and bloodless, yet witnesses keep describing convulsions and gasping. Expected, officials say. Expected doesn't always mean humane. The record problem. Florida's count climbs, 8th, 9th, 10th, as if the metric were throughput. Behind every number, a family sits in rows, gripping tissues gone damp. The ritual is precise. The endings aren't. There were apologies offered and prayers. There were no's and no sirs. There were plates left untouched and plates loaded heavy. Some inmates tried to control the room with a line or a posture. Others withheld. Every choice read differently to someone watching. Victims' families who needed the state to keep a promise, defense teams who argued the promise was crooked, officers who kept the clock.
And there were victims whose names should not be swallowed by the ritual. Janet White, Angela Clay, Latoya and Lakeisha, Sylvia, Edward and Anna, Jimmy West and Tamika Smith, Edwina Martyr, Michelle McGrath, Henry Lee Turner and Laura Ling, Mary Bowles and Gerald Thurman, Carmen Gayhart, Karen Lane. They were the first silence long before any curtain rose. If the mythology of last meals and last words makes these deaths feel orderly, we should also remember what stubbornly resists being ordered. Microphones that miss vital syllables, bodies that fight drugs, policies that harden into checklists, grief that keeps circling back to the doorway where everything changed. These were not sudden storms. They were slow-building systems, years of filings, victims' birthdays missed, legal theories tested and retested. Yet the final optics, what was on the plate, what was said into a room, carry outsized weight in our memory. It's human to look for a last line, a last bite, a last meaning. But meaning is uneven. For some families, this season finally felt like air. For others, every headline reopened the wound. And inside the chambers, officials executed a script whose edges didn't always match the lived moment. A moan that shouldn't have been there, a microphone that didn't catch contrition, a mask that looked clinical but sounded desperate. If the state is going to end a life, should these last meal and last words rituals stay exactly as they are, sparing, controlled, sometimes inaudible, because anything more risks theater? Or should we rework them for full transparency, clear audio, full transcripts, explicit method disclosures, even if that means exposing pain or failure in real time? Where do you land? And why?
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more gripping true crime breakdowns, mysteries, and criminal psychology stories, only on Twisted Case.